Good afternoon, folks. Welcome back to Never Tell Me the Odds. I'm Michael, and that's Luke. And today we're going to be talking through a number of different scenarios, and Luke's going to be giving his opinions on them and walking us through as we go. Let's jump right in. All right. Question number one. Which team do you see as being most likely to go 0-4 now that we finally have a feel for a little bit of a feel for the schedule, kind of. So, if you had to pick one, I know we haven't studied every single team and what schedule is the most competitive, but if you had to guess on these four teams, or if maybe you see a team completely outside of this as the most likely, you can throw that in as well as being 0-4 going through.
Well, again, to your point, without going like one by one through the schedule for each team and just knowing generally who they're going to play this year, I'll say the Commanders are going to be good enough, though we've talked about them kind of regressing. I think they're going to be good enough to not go 0-4 necessarily through any set of games. So I'll take them out. I think the Patriots are probably the most likely, is the short answer. But I'm trying to think of like what could a team be running into? You know, the NFC South plays the NFC West. I know that this Cardinals, but but I don't know the other. It'll just kind of depend on who they're playing. I would say without that knowledge of what their first four games look like, I'd have to go Patriots. I think Panthers are probably my close second, and reason being, not so much that I don't think they got better, is like they've had a trend. They're like the reverse Arizona Cardinals. They really are. Like they always beat us, and we start out hot and then go just dead cold.
Mm-hmm.
They start out terrible and then end the season well. So they have a history of starting out kind of poorly. I'm actually thinking the Raiders might be more competitive at times this year, but I do give them like a year to build the culture and so on. So I think they'll be better, but not like in the playoffs or anything. So I'll say Patriots, but it's actually relatively close between them and the Panthers. So,
yep, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Who would you have picked here?
Yeah, probably the Patriots. I think that Geno is a difference maker there, and just keeping them from a bad start in the Raiders. But and the Panthers, they just seem to have too much firepower now to possibly go 0-4. And the Commanders really don't have the hardest start to the season schedule. I've looked a little bit at that. But I've also saw some ideas that they may regress further. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But no, that makes perfect sense. I would definitely agree with your assessment. All right, which team do you think is the most likely to finish with a with the top five offense in 2025? Now, this is purposefully a number of good offenses from last year, but the question is, if you're only getting to bet on one, where would you be going?
Well, let's see. The Texans coming back into form because they took kind of a step back. Like they had the step back this year, or at least CJ Stroud did, that I think might happen to Washington a little bit. The Dolphins had Tua get injured. And then on top of that, they've got like Tyreek Hill starting to get a little bit older. I think he's 31. He might turn 32 before the end of the season. I can't quite remember.
Mm-hmm.
The Niners it was well documented. They had a ton of injuries. They're right up there with your Cowboys. And the Lions lost their super coveted offensive coordinator. Ben Johnson's now with the Bears, now their head coach.
Yep.
So it comes like for the Lions, do you trust that their culture is good enough that it wasn't just Ben Johnson? Like he's going to leave and they're going to turn back into the Lions. They should have enough infrastructure in place that they are at the very least 90% of what they were before. They have continually reinforced the idea that they've been pushing. So I don't see them slowing down anytime soon. The Texans should be resurgent, but they did a couple of puzzling things in the offseason, letting Laramie Tunsil go when he was playing bonkers great. But I do like CJ Stroud. I really do think he'll be better than he was last year. They've had a hard time with their wide receivers staying healthy, it seems like. Tank Dell, God bless him, he just cannot stay healthy. The Dolphins, The Dolphins are close. Again, Tua missing so many
Mhm.
games last year and throwing them out of rhythm was probably what doomed them on the year. And then the Niners with not just injuries to Brock Purdy, but everyone. But losing Debo, Kittle getting another year older. I'll say, to answer your question, I will say the Lions are the most likely to have those four
Sure.
teams. If I had a runner up, I'd probably pick the Dolphins to come back into form. I could see them being this high flying thing where they score a lot, but then they get scored on a lot. But that still means they got a great offense. I do think the Niners and the Texans will be better this year, just with lack of injury kind of thing or moving off of the sophomore slump, respectively.
Yep.
But
Yep.
I don't see either of them having quite as much consistent scoring as the Lions.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. I think there's first off, there's probably a lot of ways to evaluate what the top 5 offense, like how, are we talking total yards? Are you talking points? There's a lot of different ways of looking at this. And depending upon how you look at it, I think you could throw different people in to that mix. Yeah, I don't know. I think that for me, I think you're right. The Lions, I think, are the pick. Unless the offensive coordinator, like you said, really is going to make that big a difference, which we've definitely seen in the past. But the 49ers, I think, were a pretty good offense last year, even with all their injuries. So I don't know. They were the only other team that I felt like, man, if I was forced into betting, that might have been the only other one. All right, let's keep moving forward here. Maybe we'll keep moving forward. All right. If a non-quarterback wins the Super Bowl MVP this year, at just what position would you predict that it would be? Running back, wide receiver, a tight end. That'd be entertaining to see, Brock. Or a defensive end. If you had to pick, what would you say?
Well, I wouldn't. Let's see. I'll start eliminating. I'll say not tight end. As valuable as they are, and they get so many clutch third downs and things like that, they just statistically don't measure up to what wide receivers get as a rule. And I'm not saying it can't happen. It just doesn't seem to happen. So I'll say not tight end. I think a defensive end would have to do something stupendous to really get in there. I mean, you might have to break like the sack record. That is one of those things. If you can break a pre-existing record, the wide receiver record, the rushing record, anything like that, then you got a shot. Yeah. But outside of that, quarterbacks are coming back. A couple of years ago, they came down in their production just across the league. But they're coming back into form, and we've got multiple guys getting over 40 touchdowns a year, 3 or 4 guys, I think now, and a couple more that we know are capable. So I think it's going to be really challenging. I'll say the most likely is the one that we've been the closest to having the most recently is running back. A huge number of, if Saquon breaks the record last year, and he could have, if he'd played in the 17th game, he could have. But it should be, I'll say running back, maybe wide receiver second, then defensive end, then tight end, I guess, is last. So
yeah, that makes sense. The tight end thing would be pretty wild to see, but it would be, that's what would also make it, I think, the most entertaining as well. Sure. Like, what would a tight end have to do to end up winning Super Bowl MVP? So,
Super Bowl MVP?
Yeah, just Super Bowl. No problem. No problem.
I was just like, for just a Super Bowl, it's more likely. I'm sorry, I missed the whole.
Oh, you're good.
That thing, and he's even holding the trophy in the picture, so I'm just completely mentally negligent. I'd probably give it the same, but in Super Bowl MVP, it could actually be anyone. Like we've seen defensive end be Super Bowl MVP. So I'll probably, I'd probably still go running back, and then I'd actually put defensive end at second. Then it just seems less often that we see wide receivers and tight ends, but. Running backs and defensive players who just blow up the other team. That actually happened to Von Miller and such. So my apologies for not reading English.
No, it's all good. Well, and the analysis of MVP is still almost the same for the Super Bowl MVP. So makes perfect sense. Yep. Makes perfect sense. All right, let's see. Okay. This one's going to have some more obvious ones, but which NFL sibling duo would you think is most likely to score a touchdown in the same week? And I think some of these are just fun to remember that are out there. Christian and Luke,
Yep.
The St. Browns, the Bosas, and the Diggs. What do you think? You think we might see something that's not an offensive one in the same week?
And we could, but as far which is the most likely, it's got to be less, just because there's so much, like there are so many more offensive touchdowns than defensive ones. That would be really cool to see, like both the Diggs go off, or the Bosas.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I will go with B, the St. Browns, just because I'm not sure if Christian's going to be super healthy. And McCaffrey's in kind of a load. Luke McCaffrey's in kind of a loaded.
Yeah.
So I'll go with them. I think sadly that's it. But
no, I agree with you. I almost tried to say instead of just score touchdowns, try to reword it to be like makes the big play. Like touchdown, interception, or sacks. But I felt like if you did sacks, that almost seemed too easy.
Well, second place actually is probably not even. It's probably not even the McCaffreys. Now that I think about it, it's probably the Diggs, because Stephon Diggs is going to score some touchdowns. But and Trayvon's, I mean, that Dallas in general is big on creating opportunities for interceptions, return for touchdowns. So, I'd say that one's second, but I definitely the St. Browns first. So sorry to interrupt, but
no. Yeah, you're right. I would agree with you. I would agree. I mean, obviously the Bosas are the least likely, but it would be also the coolest one to see as well. All right. Which team is likely to get blanked 0 points in a game this season? Giants, Patriots, Titans, Panthers. And if you're a fan of any of these teams, my humble apologies for this question.
Away. I would say in general, the Panthers have the best offense of this group. And any of this that I'm going to evaluate is going to be assuming a starting quarterback is playing that game. I'm not going to be like, well, obviously Russell Wilson's going to get hurt and they're going to have me at quarterback. And so that's not good. No.
Right.
And it may not be Russell Wilson starting. And maybe they go immediately to I blanked on his name, but the guy they drafted in the first round. Oh man. The Titans are low-hanging fruit. Their division has two pretty good defenses in it. I don't have great faith in any game this season. I'll just make sure after my last couple, I was like, did I actually read this correctly? I was like, hold on. I'd say the Titans are probably the most likely. I don't think they have great weapons yet. I'd say the Patriots are my number 2, then Giants, then Panthers.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. Not that I'm hoping for that for any of these teams. Just talking about potential based on what we've seen last year and putting it together with transitions of what we've seen them add for this year. So, not hoping for that.
Right.
Unless they're playing Dallas. So,
100%.
Moving on. All right. Which defense is most likely to finish number 1 in yards allowed this season? Jets, Ravens, Browns, or 49ers?
Well, that is a good one. Immediately my head said Jets. So 2 years ago, they had a really good defense. And last year it took something of a step back. But they added some stuff to it. And they got past the Hassan Reddick trauma and all that noise. So I think they will come back to being a better defense this year. But number 1 in yards allowed. I think last year it might have been the Chargers. But of these 4 teams, the Browns do have the Browns have the right weapons. And if they can't score, then other teams might be like, we'll just run the ball. We scored 12 points. That's plenty. And we'll just run the ball for the rest of the game. Sorry, Browns fans. Listen, I'm hoping you get past this. But the Niners have a lot of question marks. And they might be them. But now, oddly enough, I'll pick the Browns. They have a good defense. Myles Garrett, Mason Graham, I believe, is the guy they took in the first round at number 5. They've got a great D line. They've got, I think they still have Ward in the secondary. I mean, they've got some solid guys on defense. If they can just, so I have a feeling it's going to be, again, them just not scoring tons of points and their opponents being like, we don't need to score 40.
Yeah.
So I'll pick the Browns, and then I'll actually take the Jets for a combination of, I think their defense will come back into form, and similarly, they may not score a whole lot. And then on top of that, I think the Jets' run game will be pretty good between Fields and Breece Hall and Braylon Allen.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay, Browns, Jets. Then I guess I'd go Ravens, Niners.
Ravens and Niners. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how much the Browns have changed or even things out. Last year, it was the Eagles who had the least yards allowed, and then the Titans, and then the Jets. The difference, of course, is that the Eagles only, I think, allowed like 310 points, and the Jets had like 400, and the Titans had like 5 million or so. So it's just funny how that all works out. But yeah, that was the last question for today. So nice work walking through those and explaining them. And yep, thanks everybody for joining us. Definitely appreciate any likes or subscribes on our journey to 100 subscribers here before the season starts. So thank you, and we'll see you again next time.